The guy I'm dating took me out for dinner to meet his friends, where they proceeded to gatekeep the crap out of me about my own hobbies and career, and I'm not so sure this relationship is the one for me anymore. Posted by you/Thrura Gulala. I need some help processing this. They made me question whether or not I'm actually authentic when it comes to what I'm interested in. I feel like I don't want to talk about my interests with anyone because I don't want to be pop quizzed. The person I, 25F, am dating, we've been together for 3 months, I'll call him Dan, 29M, recently invited me out to dinner to meet some of his coworkers. The first red flag was that he invited everyone to a Hooters and said they chose that restaurant because it's close to where they work and is easy to get to. Which is true, but there are several other restaurants nearby that offer better food and a better atmosphere. Before he invited me out to dinner, he half-joked that his co-workers, all of them male, didn't believe he was dating a hot girl who's into the same hobbies as them. These are hobbies that are considered to be primarily for men. I was a little irked by that comment, but he said he was just joking around, which pretty much became the catchphrase for the men that night. When everyone arrived at the restaurant, Dan and his co-workers were making comments about the girls who worked there and their physical appearances. This made me a little uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. Once everyone ordered their food and drinks, his friends started to quiz me about my interests. Many of them share the same male-dominated hobbies I'm into, and they more or less just tried to see if I knew facts about the hobby, as opposed to asking me questions about what I like or don't like, or what I'm currently doing in said hobby. For example, if my hobby were American history, one of them might ask an esoteric question like, "Oh, so you like American history? How many $1 bills are currently in circulation? How old is the French Broad River?" I also work as a junior automation engineer at a startup software company. I haven't been writing code for that long, as I was working in QA prior and learned how to code while I was in that position. I'm really green, and I know I still have a lot to learn. The projects I'm working on are small, and I'm getting help at work. All of his friends are senior-level software engineers and were quizzing me about my work, trying to see how much I actually know. They were asking about advanced topics I didn't know about and were asking me technical questions that don't even apply to my job. But they were all smiling and laughing, and would frequently say something like, "Aw, we're just kidding." At one point, I felt like I was at some weird interview, taking one question at a time from each D-bag at the table. I know I stopped fake smiling at some point and just emotionlessly answered their questions. I think one of them became self-aware because he just looked down at his phone for the rest of the evening, didn't ask me anything else, and looked uncomfortable. When they weren't asking pointed questions at me, they were talking to each other and ignoring me. I'd be interrupted if I tried to include my thoughts on the subject, or they'd just nod at me and look away to someone else. I should mention that all of these guys were 5 to 10 years older than me. I'm 25, the guy I'm dating is 29, and his co-workers are in their early to mid-30s. I don't have as much experience as they do. Part of me was hoping I could meet peers who could have helped guide me or answer my questions about their careers. Instead, one of them literally asked me to give him a SQL query. They all kept saying they were just kidding around or just joking and laughing about it, but it was so cringy. Dan was sitting beside me and wasn't stopping this behavior from his co-workers. He was coaching me, I guess. Saying things like, "Oh, you know this one," or "Come on, you got this, we talked about this last week." Dan also made the comment, "See, she's really smart too," to one of the guys at the table. That whole night was just awful. He was actually irritated with me because he saw my whole mood change while I was being quizzed by his friends. He said he noticed me having an attitude with his co-workers when they were just having fun and trying to get to know me. That it was immature of me to have been so obviously annoyed and that I audibly sighed multiple times when one of his friends spoke to me. I can't stop seeing Dan as a super cringy dude now. I thought he was acting ridiculous and seemed more like a 13-year-old boy as opposed to someone who is supposed to be turning 30 in a couple of months. I'm pretty sure I can't go on with the relationship at this point. I don't think this is an overreaction on my part if I were to break up with him. Is it within reason to end a relationship after this event? Everything was going fine before this happened, but now I just feel gross. The dinner happened last night, and I haven't returned any of his texts today. I know ghosting is wrong, but I don't want to look at him or speak to him. The thought of him just kind of disgusts me at this point. I've never felt like someone's show poodle before. I don't know if I'll feel differently in a week or if I'm unjustified in my anger. /relevant comments. Commenter. I wonder why Dan and his friends have to go to Hooters and leer at the waitresses when they're just so good at talking to women. Dan is an idiot who has ruined his own relationship out of a cowardly deference to the man-child behavior of his friends. He deserves them, and you deserve better. "I'm just joking" is the catchphrase of people too cowardly to stand by their own crappy views when challenged. Ops response. I knew Dan and his co-workers would frequently go to this Hooters for lunch. He always told me he didn't like how misogynistic that place was, but he really enjoyed the wings. Cue eye roll. But the way they were all talking about the waitresses, and even how they thought some of the waitresses were too old to be working there, really bothered me. Commenter 2. You are seeing Dan as a super creepy dude because Dan is a super creepy dude. This guy does not respect you, and he purposely brought you to a restaurant and disrespected you by talking about the women there. Here's what happened. They brought you to Hooters to undermine your confidence and put you at a disadvantage. Hi, we are a bunch of guys that are going to go to Hooters and talk about the appearance of the women there while the one woman at our table sits and watches us. They all, including Dan, treated you like a specimen, as if you were the stupid little girl. Dump Dan and his juvenile, misogynistic friends, please. Ops response. You're right. In a way, I'm kinda glad this night happened so I could see who Dan really is. Even if he didn't mean anything malicious, he's still an immature bro, and I don't want to be with that. I'm not going to ghost him. I think I'm going to use this thread to come up with a series of good pointers about how everything he did was wrong. I'm also laughing at the fact that his friends will likely make fun of him after I break up with him. I'll do it this weekend so he has something to talk about Monday morning at work. Commenter 3. One of my exes was a SW programmer, and she had more in common with my SW friends than she did with their girlfriends and wives, so at parties, she hung out with us guys. None of us made her feel uncomfortable about work stuff. Your boyfriend and his friends are not a good group of people to become involved with. Ops response. It surprised me how crappy these guys were because everyone at my current job, male/female/junior/senior/manager/whatever, is cool as F. They are all helpful and super humble. The more senior people have no problem holding your hand and teaching you without making you feel like a dumbo. We all have to start somewhere. When someone guessed the hobby was Magic the Gathering. It was actually several hobbies/interests that Dan would brag about to these guys: D&D, video games, and oddly enough the fact that I enjoy expensive scotch. Update 4 days later. Wow, I triggered a lot of fragile men in my first post. To those of you who were triggered, all I have to say is, lol. The actual update is a little further down, if that's all you wanted to see. I got a lot of private messages and DMs. Many of them were angry messages from men. I guess they were too cowardly to post a public comment on my post because they knew they would be downvoted to oblivion. To those of you who were nice, I'm sorry I couldn't respond to each of you. This is also a throwaway, and I won't be responding to messages and posts after I'm done with this post and comments. Also, I read the most downvoted comments on my post. That stuff was some of the most painfully cringy material I think I've ever seen on these relationship posts. It was like some weird mix of the _Donald, Brainsels, and conspiracy subreddits coming together to post some weird crap sexist BS. There were people describing themselves as a female, which is a dead giveaway that it's actually an incel pretending to be a woman. I find this to be absolutely hilarious. Anyway, thank you for sharing your stories. But I'm sorry so many of you had to go through something similar to this at one point in your life. This isn't the first time I've been gatekept either, just the most blatant. I wanted to add that I know how real men act around each other. I have a brother, and I've been around his friends plenty of times. Yes, they rib each other and new members of the group, they joke around, but they've never just asked trivia questions as their only means of communication. They've never been bullies, or highly judgmental, or straight up boring like the group I met last week. I've been around groups of men before and had it not feel like an awful interview. What the group did to me last week was not a friendly thing to do to anyone, even if it were another man entering the group for the first time. The update. After the post, I decided it would be best to end things through a phone call. I mentioned ghosting, but it's probably best he knows how and why he effed up. I waited until Saturday to reach out to him and told him, we need to talk. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is basically how the convo went. Dan, this is about the dinner, isn't it? Me, yeah, it is. Dan, and? Me, I don't think I've ever felt so unwelcome in a group before. It felt like a crappy interview, all they did was test my knowledge. No one tried to get to know me, and when actual conversation was going on, I was ignored or interrupted if I tried to talk. Dan, I don't feel like it was anything like that. Me, okay, so how often do you guys sit around just asking questions like, quick, what is the SQL query if you want to delete 2 rows from 2 different tables? Dan, I don't know. Me, no really, do you quiz your friends randomly like that at work or out and about? Dan, no, not really. Me, and why not? Why don't you just ask lightning round quizzes like that? Because it's not what normal people do? Dan, I don't know. They were just having fun and joking around. Me, It wasn't fun for me. I have male and female friends in all sorts of professions. I've never cornered any of them to test their knowledge. I trust they know what they're doing. I ask them about work, what they're doing, normal questions. Dan, okay. Me, I'm not going to print out a CPA exam and quiz my accountant friend. Don't you think that would be a little effed up? Dan, I don't know, maybe? We talked a little more about that night, and I gave him more specific examples of what he and his friends did, and he never really had any good answers. It was a lot of I don't know and single-word responses. I told him I created a Reddit post and I would send it to him. He was a little pissed off that I did that, felt like I had no right to do so. At the end of the conversation, he asked if we were done. I told him that I can't see a future with him, that I saw a different side of him that night, and I don't want to be someone's prize poodle on display for the world to see. He didn't really say anything after that and just hung up the phone. I sent him the URL for my first post. He texted me throughout the weekend, but I didn't respond. He read the post that I sent him and wasn't happy with it, and said he couldn't believe so many people were on my side and were hating on him. He sent a few more angry texts after that, like he couldn't believe we were breaking up over something so stupid. He did send a few rounds of "I'm sorry and let's try to work through this," but when I didn't respond, he just went back to angry texting me. Also, I did find his friend who buried his head in his phone that night and sent him the Reddit link and asked if that sounded like what happened. Dan's friend said he knew what his friends were doing was wrong and felt bad for me. He apologized for not stepping in and assumed that Dan would eventually speak up for me on my behalf. He also apologized for joining them in the beginning and wished me luck in my career. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. The one-word answers and "I don't know" are what a kid says when they're in trouble and knows it was wrong to do that thing. He knows exactly why and what he was doing, he's a grown man. He just doesn't want to say because he knows it would only dig the hole deeper. Commenter 2. You made the right call. But I have a question, why did you explain it to him when he didn't even show interest in your reasons? Just by reading, I felt annoyance and anger flaring up, and I wasn't even involved in any of it. Ops response. It was frustrating, but part of me wanted him to understand that what he and his friends did was wrong. I was hoping he would have a moment of clarity. And I also didn't want some future poor woman to go through that BS again.